Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately named IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. As part of our efforts to promote play, we're happy to introduce our Porch Play Chats. These are conversations that focus on a wide range of topics, from experts who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find the latest Porch Play Chats and learn more about IPA-USA on Instagram or Facebook, or by visiting our website, IPAUSA.org. I'm Deb Lawrence, president of IPA-USA. With me on the porch is Lisa Murphy.
Hello.
Lisa is a board member and an expert on play, and Rusty Keeler, who is also a board member. He's a vice president of IPA-USA. Rusty is the author of an upcoming book, Adventures in Risky Play, and of course a natural playscape designer. So Rusty has lots of great information to share with us today. And the question that we're going to ask you, Rusty, to get us started is give us sort of an overview of how you define risky play, and then help us understand the difference between risky play and hazardous play.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Are you on your porches too?
We hope you are.
Yeah. All right. Glad to be here. Risky play. In some ways, risky play is just play, right? And sometimes we think like maybe that's just an adult's idea of something that children are doing and that they're doing naturally. Children are always taking risks. Life is about taking risks and going to the next level and trying things that you've never tried before. And, that's everything. That's everything in life. Whether it's a toddler learning to walk, they might fall. There is a risk that a toddler might fall when they're learning to walk, when they're learning to toddle. And of course, we don't stop them from, toddling because we want them to get to the next level. It gets a little tougher when kids are older and they're doing things that make us nervous as adults. So I think in some ways it's the adult thinking that's risky because I feel really uncomfortable about it and I'm going to say no, or I'm going to assess the risk. I'm going to say, oh, something bad could happen to that kid bouncing on a log or swinging on something. So I'm going to say no because I could see what could happen. And that has been the thinking, I would say, for a while now, for generations. Maybe it's different than when you grew up and how you played. And, it's good for us to kind of, when we talk about any kind of play, but risky play, when we're designing for play, to think back to how were we as children? What did we do? How did we play? Mm-hmm. And as we do that, it's good. Sometimes we have these deep breaths and we remember, oh yeah, I was free ranging. I was out till my mom called me for dinner. We played in the ditch. We played by the railroad tracks, by the creek, all this stuff that our mothers didn't know about.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Did you do any of that? Did you do any of that stuff? Mm-hmm. So, ultimately we want children to grow up. Of course, we want them safe, but we want them to grow up, confident or resilient, or to be able to, I think most importantly, assess risk on their own, to decide for themselves, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? And that's what we all need in life, right? We all need to know, what do we want to try? What do we not want to try? And taking risks it's good to be able to know that you can, and you can succeed, whether it's balancing on a log or learning to read or asking someone out on a date or driving in a car or going to college or anything. To know, can you do this? Or do you want to try to do this? And that we've had experiences succeeding, trying something we've never done before and succeeding, and trying something that we've never tried before and maybe failing, but the idea that we can get up again. The children can learn that they can get up again and try again, or decide no. And I think that's what we want to start to shift the pendulum a little more, is trusting children to know themselves or help them learn themselves how to say yes or no. Often we spend a lot of time jumping in as adults to say no because we could see these things that could happen. You could poke your eye out. But now we're realizing that we should also look at the benefits of things, risks and benefits. And so that's ultimately what we're talking about is seeing that bouncing on a log or playing with a stick, there's benefits. There could be risks. You could poke your eye out, but there's also benefits. And to say those too, verbalize them, to be creative. We're creative with the negative things. You'll break your neck, and we can see all these horrible things. But we should use that same creativity to start to see all the great things and remember all the great things. And when we see risky play, if we can take deep breaths and just watch, that gives us a chance to see the reality of what children are doing. Oh, they're not going to stab each other with that stick. They're going to build some sort of neat fairy hut, or they're going to stir some potion, or who knows, it's magic wand. So we can observe what's really going on, and it can give us time to think positive thoughts. What are the benefits of this? So I think that's some of the stuff that we're kind of, as we shift our brains from just thinking about negative things about risk to also thinking about the positive things.
So I really like that because it's helpful for people to remember back to when they were children, right? And it's helpful for them to, I can't even, the things my mother didn't know, I did. But it's also helpful to take a minute and reflect and just say, is this really something I need to jump in for?
And shut down. Do I really need to shut this down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's hard for teachers. I think it's hard. It's hard for nanas, right? So, I can teach this stuff, but boy, you get my grandchildren on a playground or out and I have to truly hold myself back from, don't go up the slide. I have to put my hand over my mouth and watch to see what they're doing. And it's not, yeah. Ooh. So how can we, in a minute, I want to talk about the difference between taking a risk and what a hazard is, but how can we help parents understand if I'm in a child care program and I have a natural playground that hopefully Rusty Keeler has designed, and they are, it is filled with, I call them acceptable risks, right? So, because that's my reflection tool. I say, is this an acceptable risk? But that may not be the terminology we want to use. But how do I help parents recognize the value of not just having a static piece of climbing equipment? How do I engage them in understanding that they too can let their child climb a tree in the front yard or in the backyard? How do I do that as a director or an owner or as someone who is trying to encourage parents to allow their children to take more risk?
Yeah, well, I think the goals of the early childhood professional, the caregiver, the goals are the same as the parents. You want these children to thrive. You want them to survive, but you want them to thrive and have the best opportunity for play and growth and fun and questions and discovery. Just to have the full range of life's experiences and opportunities within a safe, safe fenced-in area to early childhood, right? So the whole world, I think of that as for those young children, that's their whole world.
Yeah.
So for design-wise, what do we put in there to, what is their world? Are there hills? Is it just static equipment? Static equipment can do great things, but we should think beyond that to hills and pathways and nature and the seasons and plants that go through changes and all that kind of stuff. So there's the idea of creating the world, the environment, the landscape, but then it's how are we as adults in that space? And what do we say yes to and what do we say no to? Because you could have the most beautiful natural play space, but if the adults are nervous the whole time, they might not let the kids do all the great things that playscape is inviting them to do. Balance on a log or roll down a hill or go up, slide, or that kind of stuff. So climb a tree. So I think that helping parents see the distinction. Well, okay, you can talk benefits of risk.
Mhm.
You can say we're actually really on top of things, even though we're letting kids do things that look a little risky. You know, we're letting them climb a tree, or they're balancing on this wobbly log. The risk benefit analysis is one tool
Mhm.
to say, okay, we know that log is wobbly, and we know that tree, bad thing, you could fall out of a tree. But then we've looked at the benefits, you know, body awareness, strength, planning, self-confidence, and feeling
Mhm.
good of accomplishment, all that kind of stuff. And then we've also looked at how we manage the space. And with a tree, I've seen people like say, all right, we're going to trim any eye-pokey branches. An example, you could do this with anything that somebody might be nervous about, but you should also do it with anything that's risky. It's a little riskier. So you look at the situation, risk-benefit analysis, and then you say, well, how do we manage it? And say with a tree, you could trim it eye-pokey branches, or you could treat it like playground equipment and put the fall zone, wood chips. I've worked with groups that do that. So they do it, they follow the guidelines, right? So you can say, okay, we've done all the right things, and then the risk and the hazard, the distinction between the risk and the hazard thing comes up. And people have different ways of describing this. I like this way, that a risk is something that a child chooses to do. That might be a little edgy. There could be the potential to get hurt, but they're making the choice themselves. I want to balance on that log. I see it. I know that it's wobbly. I saw my buddy fall off. I could fall off too, but I'm gonna choose. But the hazard is something that's dangerous that a kid could get hurt on, but they don't see that they're not making that choice, and that could be a broken glass, a chunk of concrete, all that kind of stuff that maybe they would choose to fall. They could fall off that log, but they didn't realize there was something in there that could really get them. So that's a hazard, and that's the kind of thing that we want to get out. And then we have to be vigilant about. So when we're allowing more risk, it's really important that we are very, very careful and thoughtful still. It's not, we're just like, oh yeah, do whatever you want. It's like, oh no, we have to be really on it, get rid of all the hazards, and always be checking. Have that be a part of your safety. You have to have your eyes on all the time, looking, get that stuff out of there, so that and then it's also a way that adults can feel more comfortable saying yes, knowing like they did something. They removed all those hazards, so I can feel more comfortable saying yes. And then when you say yes more, even the no's are important. But they become even more important because kids realize, they're saying they let me do a lot more, but if they say no, that's a whole other subject. But if they say no, that's really serious.
I need to listen, right, when they say no, because they're not saying no all the time.
Yeah.
So I really like the idea of finding ways to help early care and education professionals and parents understand that risk is part of growing up, and risk is necessary. I mean, Bev Boz would say, you got to take a risk to learn to read. So if they haven't taken a risk before it's time to learn to read, then it's going to be more difficult, right? And so it has some long-term benefits. Yeah, so many that, and especially building confidence. I remember when I climbed up the highest I could on one of our pecan trees. I had never climbed that high before. And I was so proud of myself that I had not been too afraid. But I climbed up again. It's children are putting themselves in that place. We're not an adult saying, go climb that high tree. And I think that's a huge difference.
I think we're also facing a generation that's going to suffer from the risk aversion, right? That fear of absolutely doing anything, so they end up not doing anything. Yeah. And I know I've seen evidence of that already, and to me that's a huge benefit of providing more risk. I would call it developmentally appropriate risk taking, right? Which is very, very different than being disengaged. And I think sometimes taken out of context, that's where being a self-professed proponent of risky play doesn't mean that I'm turning a blind eye, right? It doesn't mean that I'm just sending them off willy-nilly, chaotic, do whatever you want. And often the trust between the parents or the provider or the coworker or the supervisor, that almost needs to be nurtured before there is an acceptance of what we might be calling a more risk appropriate or risk risky playground.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You have to trust me.
Small steps, yeah. And it's a relationship, yeah, the relationships, and knowing the children, you know, and then that's different than like a licensor comes in just cold, sees the place, and they make their, you know, assessments. But then that's even different than what the caregivers have, because they have those relationships and the trust that's built up over time, day after day, and they've seen children develop and not be able to do that log and then be able to do it, and you know, and all the growth, and they know which kids are they need to be really vigilant about, and other kids that they're fine over there.
We talked about that last night, actually, in a workshop. I showed an image, a photograph of a kid riding a bike, the cool kid bike at preschool, you know, the low rider bike at the preschool, and a girl standing over him on the shoulders and going. And we talked just how about what I knew about the girl. I didn't need to intervene because I knew her body. I knew, you know, I had that history with her and what her physical capabilities were, versus maybe the kid that's brand new who takes off their shoes and jumps on the back of the bike. And I'm going to be more observant to that because I don't have the context yet of what I know about this child.
Yeah.
So
and
we
so
are paying attention.
I remember, you know, Reggio Emilia talks about, you know, you need to trust children, right? So I think if we can, in our reflection of, is this something I need to intervene on, or is this, we need to really trust children better than I think we do now. I think we're wanting to wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them safe and protect them instead of just trusting them.
And
So
there's
Rusty,
the awareness process. I know you're wrapping it up, but the awareness of investigating what I, as the adult, bring to the table becomes an important piece of this. You know, what are my own personal memories of this kind of play? What's my own personal, like, you know, how often am I making that mom sound, you know, when I see kids climbing? Because, you know, that mom sound's a huge trigger, like, ooh, go one more higher, you know. But the self-reflection piece, I think, is very important when you have a conversation about risky play.
Yes, absolutely. So Rusty, thank you so much. And don't forget, Rusty's new book is coming out, Adventures in Risky Play.
Yep.
So you'll want to
end by saying that people can just start small. You don't have to do these crazy risky things that make your heart beat, but just try saying yes to like one more thing, or put cardboard boxes out and step back, and just something that's a little bit looser, a little wilder, but you just baby steps, because as the children are learning that they can do things, you as a caregiver are also learning, oh, I can trust, I can take a step back, I can get through this too.
That's
start small.
Such an important message, because we've got to stop interfering with children who are attempting to do something that's natural for kids to do. So Rusty, thanks so much. And to view other Porch Play chats, you can visit IPA-USA.org. And until next time, thanks for listening and keep playing.
Bye-bye. Nice to see you, Rusty.
Rusty, don't